the recording, and you all will receive a copy of the recording after we're finished with our webinar today. So I am Hallie Crawford. Welcome, everyone. We greatly appreciate your time being here today. It's a little bit cloudy in Atlanta. Hopefully it's nicer where you are. We have had a ton of rain lately, and I'm just waiting for all those flowers to pop up as a result. So we are going to be talking about being authentic in the workplace. I'm Hallie Crawford. I am a certified career coach, speaker, and author based in Atlanta, Georgia. And I have been coaching and training for over 18 years. I absolutely love what I do. And because of that, I am very excited to be here with you all today and greatly appreciate your time. So let's dive right in. And I wanted to show you all, get to the next slide here right away, and talk about what we mean and how we define authenticity for our organization. So the first thing I want you all to know is that I understand how it feels to not be able to be authentic in your career or at work. I know how it goes because I struggled with it enormously in the last full-time job that I had when I was living in Chicago. I felt like I could not be myself at all at work. I was completely inauthentic, not just in terms of the job being the wrong fit for me, but the culture of the organization was not a right fit. I wasn't playing to the strengths or leveraging the strengths that I really wanted to be leveraging. And I just felt like I couldn't be truly myself and couldn't share my views, my thoughts, my values within that organization. So unfortunately for me, which some of you may be able to relate to this, I was crying in the bathroom for many days in a row before I decided to quit that job. So I totally understand how it feels to not be able to be authentic at work, not just from personal experience, but also from working with the clients that we work with all over the country and have done so for the past 18 years. So bottom line is, we totally get it, and we totally get how uncomfortable and kind of disconcerting it can feel to not be yourself at work. So here's the deal. That's where I was a long time ago, and eventually I did quit that job and started my coaching practice. It took me several years to do that and transition into coaching. But now today, I am able to feel incredibly authentic in what I do and be myself all day, every day. And I love this quote that I wanted to share with you from Oscar Wilde, be yourself, everyone else is taken. I'm sure you all have seen this before. But I want you to know that it is possible to be more of yourself and more authentic in your workplace. We're going to talk today about, why this is important. And actually, let me show you the agenda right now. We're going to talk today about why authenticity is important, not just at work, but in general for our personal lives as well. And how when we're not authentic, how it not just smushes our identity, but can make us feel less fulfilled. We're going to discuss 3 steps to help you be more authentic at work in the right and in the appropriate way. So that's part of what we're going to discuss. Is there are certain topics that are just taboo and not a great idea, especially in certain workplaces. But we're going to talk about how to be more authentic by becoming more self-aware, by identifying the purpose that you have in your workplace and the appropriateness of sharing certain things at your workplace and the culture there. And then finally, talking about how to communicate more clearly so that you are more authentic on a regular basis. We want you to make this real after this webinar today. I know how it is to attend something like this and we get all jazzed and excited to, do something about it. And then the phone rings or, your child is sick or whatever goes on. So we really want you to at least write down and take one action step, even if it's a small one, towards making this a reality for yourselves. I find that when there's something like this, when it's kind of like a psychological shift, if you will, especially at work, it can take time to implement that. So it's okay to do it in baby steps. And then finally, I did want to let you know a couple of things just really quickly, that we do offer a free career strategy session to people who attend our webinars. I'm happy to talk with any of you if you feel like you need additional support or assistance, specific advice on your unique situation after today. And also, if anyone would like a copy of the presentation of the PowerPoint slides, please feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com. We'd be happy to share those with you so that you don't feel like you have to be frantically taking notes. Just as a reminder for everyone, you will be getting a recording of the audio and video from today with the slides. And there is a handout that is in the chat box as well that I encourage you to download. It's a Word document. Download and use it as we're going today. All right, so let's talk about why authenticity is so important. It's important because we need to feel like we're being truly ourselves at work and in our personal lives. Here's a great quote from this: "Authenticity has become the gold standard for leadership in a lot of ways." This is from the Harvard Business Review in 2015. But a simplistic understanding of what authenticity means and how that plays out, and not really understanding how you can be more authentic at work, it can hinder your growth as a leader and even just as an employee, and it can limit the impact. So as we all can understand, I think, and relate, when you have worked with a coworker or a manager, or there's a leader in your organization who is really genuine and authentic, we connect with them more, right? It's kind of they're easier to connect with, easier to understand and relate to, and it builds an enormous sense of trust when we have that as well, that authenticity going on. So this is part of why it's so important. We want to be the duck on the right, not the plastic one on the left. So authenticity as a basic definition, and by the way, I want you all to write down the answers to our polls today. We're not actually going to do them because I want to make sure we have enough time in our 30 minutes that we have. But authenticity basically is something that's not copied, it's not false, it's real, it's our true selves coming out, at least to a certain extent in our workplace, okay? And I would like to just hear from you all. If you could actually just put it in the chat box. I'm going to keep talking, but if you could put it in the chat box, I'd love to hear if you feel you can't be fully authentic at work, just a yes or no, and I'll read that out. We'll do the polls that way. I'll read that out in just a second. And here are the three things that we want to talk about in order to help you better understand, you know, who, not just who you are as a professional, but also as a person. Because when we work with clients, and then we'll take a look at this next slide here, but when we work with clients, we always have them identify and look at who are they as a person first, even in their personal lives. What are their personal values? What's important to them outside of work? Because that's part of what we want to bring into our work lives, at least to a certain extent. It doesn't have to be every single thing, but don't just think about, everyone, as we go through these steps here today, don't just think about who you are as a professional and that professional persona that we all have. Think about who you are as a person as well, and how those values can start to shine through in terms of your workplace, okay? So we've got one person that said, yes, they can't be themselves at work. Thanks for sharing that. And we've got two people, which is a really good point here, sharing and saying, it depends on the person I'm interacting with. And that makes perfect sense. So one of the things you want to do and consider, everyone who are thinking about that, it depends on the person that you're interacting with. Of course, there's going to be more and less that we can share if the person that we're talking with, we can trust them, if they are transparent with us, if it's appropriate to share something with them, depending on if they're our boss or not. So you do need to pick and choose, obviously, the information that you share, but we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the things that you can pretty much share across the board at work to a certain extent, and that will help. So thanks for sharing that. So 3 keys to understanding who you are and being more authentic at work is on the slide here. Who you are, what you want to share, and what is appropriate to share, again, depending on the situation and the person you're talking to. So think about it as well, everyone, not just depending on the person, but what's the scenario in the situation as well. Obviously, some things will be more appropriate to share one-on-one versus in a group. So number 1, thinking about who you are as a person. This is the first one we want you to consider. And we want you to identify what your values and your strengths are. These are 2 things that, for the most part, most people can share at least some of their values and their strengths as well, ideally at work, because these things that are relevant, you know, to the workplace, so to speak, okay? So let me share a couple of things about this point here. When I'm looking away, I'm just looking at my other screen here to make sure we're covering everything. So first of all, in order to be truly authentic and true to ourselves, we need to know who we are in terms of your values and your strengths. These are 2 pieces that can help enormously help you be more authentic, but understand what you can share. So identifying your values will help you identify what makes you happy, as well as looking at your strengths, the skills that you want to utilize on a regular basis that will make you more fulfilled, but that also you can share with your teammates so that you get the right kinds of projects, okay? You want to have a career And honestly, you want to be in a workplace with a culture and environment that either honors your values or at the very least it doesn't step on them or smush them. So if any of you are feeling kind of this rub between your organization and the mission and the culture, it could be because you have a different set of values than some of your coworkers or what the organization has. So with certain people, one of the things I want you to consider, if you feel like you can't be as genuine or authentic with them, or if they're not doing so with you, one of the ways that you can try to think about or is identify what are your values and what are their values and how might they be different, because that could be causing some of the disconnect or the frustration or even conflict in some cases. And if you are able to and willing to share a little bit more of who you are as a person and what your values and strengths are, that can invite the other person to do so as well, okay? Using your strengths regularly, just by the way, if we move to that one for a minute and move off of values, using your strengths regularly leads to authenticity as well. Ask others what they see their strengths are and try to understand where they're coming from, not just in terms of their values, but what their strengths and beliefs are. So one of the things that you can do to help kind of have or foster greater open communication between people, especially those that you might be frustrated with, is instead of telling something or giving advice, ask them some questions, get to know them a little bit better, invite them to open up a little bit, because that can help foster that open communication and therefore greater authenticity. All right, the next slide, we talked about the strategy session. Happy to do that with anyone, especially for those people that feel like, gosh, I have this certain situation with someone and the situation or the details are really specific. Feel free to email us at admin@halliecrawford.com to set that up. I'd be happy to chat with you. Okay, so the second thing that you want to consider is what you want to share. So after you've started to identify what your values are and what your strengths are, what is your motivation for sharing? So we talked about this just a little bit a second ago when I was referencing, okay, do you want to share with someone because you want to have a more trusting or collaborative relationship with them? Do you want to share with them to encourage them to do so with you so that they will open up more about what is frustrating with them or for them about a specific project that you're working on? So before you just start sharing, think about what's the motivation for you to do so. It could be as simple as, I just want to share more because I feel like I'm stuffing myself down, and that's okay. So the difference between sharing and oversharing, take a look at this slide here for a second. Research on self-disclosure, it suggests that we do like each other more. And by the way, greater trust is built when we do share. But on the other hand, we have to be careful to not disclose things that are going to make other people uncomfortable or are socially inappropriate. So the three things you want to think about when you're considering sharing for whatever purpose it is what do I want to say? When should I say this? Is it appropriate one-on-one or in a meeting or over lunch, a social situation versus a work situation? And how often do I need to be doing this? Is it every single day, or no, I just want to share a little bit more frequently, on a weekly basis, on a more regular basis, once a week, so to speak. So I want you all to think about this next poll here, please. And if you could put in here, keep to yourself or overshare. We're looking at the extremes here just to see where everybody falls. That would be great if you could just put it in the chat box. And if you're more introverted, actually like I am, I'm actually more introverted than extroverted. I'm 60% introvert, 40% extrovert. So I can pose as an extrovert is what I like to say. We tend to keep to ourselves, and the authenticity or the issue or lack of it at work can be more difficult in some cases for introverts, but that doesn't mean that it's impossible. And for those that are more extroverted, sometimes you may have the tendency to overshare, so you need to be careful about that and think about, again, the who, the what, how often, and the why, okay? Let's take a look at this next slide here for a minute. This is the Johari Window. It is a model, a psychological model that was developed by two psychologists. I believe it was in the 50s. And it's a great model for sharing, being more authentic, and self-disclosure. So if you take a look at the model here, the first box on the top left is the open window. This is what I know about myself, where I'm self-aware, and what others know about me as well, okay? And these are things that are just kind of common knowledge. It may be how many kids you have. It may be a vacation that you went on recently. It may be, you know, what type of food you like the most, whatever it is, okay? This is the open window. The next one, number 2, is the blind spot. These are things that you don't know about yourself that are just hidden that other people may know, but you don't know, okay? So these are things that others know about you from observing you or working with you, but you're not totally self-aware or aware of for whatever reason. You haven't taken the time to think about it, or no one has given you that feedback. We encourage you to invite feedback from other people. So one of the things in terms of being more authentic to consider is that, again, it's not just about, okay, what do I want to share all the time, but inviting other people to do so as well, and asking them questions, as well as asking for feedback about if you need to do something differently at work, or if they have a different opinion on something, to invite that honest communication. The third one on the bottom left here is the hidden. These are things that you know about yourselves, but others don't know. And there are some things like religion, politics, there are certain topics you don't want to go talk about, you know, in depth, your really nasty divorce, for example. There are some topics that are just best kept to yourself. And this is really up to you to a certain extent, what you're comfortable sharing, but then there is a line that you just don't cross that's not going to be appropriate. And if you think about it this way, if you ask yourself the question, is this something, the thing that I'm about to share or I'm considering sharing, is this something that could make someone else uncomfortable? And if that's the case, you want to think about it again and consider keeping it to the side, sharing with them, you know, one-on-one, or just keeping it hidden altogether. And then finally, number 4 is what I don't know about myself, so the things that we're not aware of, and what other people don't know about me as well, the completely hidden. If you take a look at this next slide here, as relationships develop, kind of our goal is, over time, is to go from the open box being small like it is on the left, which is how it is typically at the beginning of a relationship, to a closer relationship, again, a reasonably, you know, a professional relationship, of course, but a closer relationship where the open window is a little bit bigger. The blind spot ideally gets smaller as you become more self-aware and hopefully ask for and solicit feedback. And then the unknown becomes smaller as well. So typically, as a relationship grows, if it is productive and healthy, so to speak, this is personal and professional, you want that larger, that open pane to become larger over time, okay? One of the things to think about when you're considering what's appropriate, let me give you a couple of tools in terms of communication as well, is if you feel uncomfortable speaking with a certain person or in a specific situation, there are different things you can do there. You can ask for support from a coworker. If it's in a particular meeting, for example, that you tend to get uncomfortable, ask them to sit next to you the next time you have that meeting, just for that kind of moral support. Prepare in advance for that meeting so that you don't feel kind of caught off guard by anything, and also hopefully a little bit more comfortable. And if you're having trouble with someone who's a difficult coworker or employee, or a scenario like that where you're having conflict, take some time, instead of just focusing on the project or the task, take some time to step back and talk about how you may need to redesign that relationship with them to have it be more effective. So do you need to say, hey, I think we can work together more effectively. Can we talk about ways that we could do that and even brainstorm it? Do you need to have better ways that you meet, like on a more regular basis, that are more consistent, and that could help? Do you need to have some agreements put together about how you provide feedback to each other? Or if one or the other person is, you know, frustrated about something, how you both handle that? So one of the ways to help be more authentic and encourage someone else to do so as well is to have conversations about how you're working together, not just performing the work itself, okay? And if we look at number 3 and thinking about on the slide here, what is appropriate to share at work, I gave you some thoughts before, some possible topics. It is going to depend on the culture, the timing, when and where you're sharing, and whether the other person is going to be open to sharing or not, or open to listening to you. So one of the other things you need to consider too is the timing of things. It's a great thing to say to someone, are you in a coachable moment right now? Is this an okay time for me to chat with you about something that may be kind of touchy to hear? Or I need to give you some feedback that, may be kind of uncomfortable. Is that okay right now? Pay attention to the timing and ask permission if you need to share something that would help you be more authentic, but maybe something that could cause a rub. Finally, you want to think about the audience, and you want to think about the environment, the setting, or the situation that you're in as well. Now, we understand that obviously different cultures or the culture of different organizations can be different. Some places and some relationships, it's more okay to share, more frequently and more personal things. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There is always going to be, or always will be, different people at work that you can't share as much with, and those that you will. But what your goal is to move the needle a little bit more so that you can feel like you can be as authentic as possible, kind of within reason, within your organization, with those people that it's okay to do so. It doesn't have to be with every single person and all of the time, okay? So let's take a look at our last couple of slides here, and I want you to write down, let's think about action steps here for a second, and we actually will have a couple of minutes today to do some questions. If you want to field those in the chat box for me, please feel free to go ahead and ask some questions right away. But I want you to think about one thing that you will do this week to start being more authentic at work. Is it identifying what your personal and career values are as a first step? And then considering starting to blend those into your work life more often and discussing those with coworkers or asking them what theirs are. Is there a touchy situation with someone at your office that you need to address, and going through, what are our guidelines, like our team charter or our relationship charter, so to speak, or our agreement? How can we agree to work together a little bit more effectively and go through some guidelines there? Or it could simply be talking to your boss or doing an evaluation of your current workday and how can you leverage your strengths in a more effective way because you're not using them as much, okay? So write down what your action items are, please, and then go ahead. I'm going to share some possible action items too, some other ideas in addition to the things that I said. And please feel free in our last couple of minutes here to go ahead and ask questions. I'll keep my eye on the chat box about anything that's coming up for you, okay? Do you need to practice more self-disclosure? That could be one of your action items. Another thing to do is to think about and write down kind of a journal of several days, like 2 or 3 days of when you don't feel as authentic or feel like you can't be as authentic on a consistent basis. So noting what those situations are and also who those people are that you're interacting with, that can help give you strategies to think about, okay, what are the action steps I need to take? Do I need to talk with this specific person? Or, hey, is it not really worth it? This is what it's going to be for, this work relationship, but let me develop this one over here that I think could be more positive, okay? And then finally, could you benefit in being more authentic by telling others more about your thoughts and opinions and suggestions for projects, your desires and your beliefs? One person says that they need to dial it down a little bit, that they share, too much and they're way too extroverted. So what you want to do in that situation, and then we've got a question that I'll address as well. If you are very extroverted and you feel like maybe you're kind of bulldozing over everybody else or it's just too much, practice being quiet during the course of every conversation that you have, whether it's one-on-one or during a meeting. And count to 5 before you speak up or share something and think about, is this the right thing to share? Is it the right time? That can help you kind of, rein it in a little bit. Okay, so one question is, I find it hard to get feedback from peers on my performance. You ask them how a session went and they'll say good or fine. How can you get more information like out of that blind spot, if you will? That's a great question. Let me see if I can get my mouse over here too, because I want to answer the others too. So what I would do is I would talk to people one-on-one kind of privately and say, especially people that you get along better with or hopefully you have a better connection with, and ask them directly, say, hey, can you give me more feedback about this? Because I really want to know, can you give me feedback on the content or on the design? So if you prompt them a little bit, that can actually help as well, because they may not know, like, not just what to say, but they may not know specifically what you want feedback on. And if you prompt them a little, that can help you get them to be like self-disclose a little bit more and get clarity. So I would pick 2 or 3 people that you want to like pick up the phone or go talk with them and say, hey, can I have a couple minutes of your time? Will you tell me a little bit more about how this went and let me know, what did you think about this, this, and this? Kind of put them on the spot a little bit more, okay? Another one is I'm used to people sharing things that make others uncomfortable, such as when they talk about being thin in front of a larger colleague. How do you deal with that? That's a great question. These are things that obviously are very touchy. So if this person, for example, the person who's saying things in front of someone else and they're oversharing and maybe not being as mindful, if this person is someone that you can kind of pull aside and chat with directly one-on-one, if you have a positive enough relationship with them, it doesn't have to be that you're incredibly close with them, but if you have a positive enough relationship with them, I would recommend pulling them aside in, a quiet place, one-on-one, and saying, can I share or ask you something and talk to you about something that may be a little bit touchy and maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but I just wanted to share because I'm concerned that it's having an impact on other coworkers. And I'm not sure if it is, but I just wanted to, say something. And then hopefully, ideally, they'll say, yes, that's fine. And you can, approach the situation that way. If that's not the case, or you think they might get defensive, in some cases, it may be appropriate to be, if it's more extreme, to bring in your boss and bring it up with them, and they can deal with it if they feel like it's appropriate or not. But you can at least say, hey, I wanted to share this and bring it up. And in very extreme cases, I know that different HR departments at organizations are obviously different at different places, but if it's a really extreme case, I think this also could be something that you could bring to HR and say, look, this has been going on a lot. There's this one person, and I'm not really sure how to handle this situation. Is this something that you could talk to them about? Because a neutral third party bringing it up could be a good way to go. So those are some options of how to handle that. And again, it depends a little bit on the situation. Okay, let me see if we've got any others. Tend to keep to myself, more of an introvert, totally understand that. You're very welcome, everyone. Really appreciate your time today. We don't have any more questions and we're getting to a close here. Oh, we've got one more question. Please, just as a reminder, you will get the recording. Ask us if you need the PowerPoint, and I'm happy to chat with you for a few minutes in a strategy session if needed. Final question is, starting at a new employer in a couple weeks, any further insight on how to approach this scenario? What I would do is, in your first couple of weeks, you want to get a sense of, the culture there and what's okay to share and what's not. Who are the key players there, and what's the culture like? Is it very open or is it more closed, so that you can kind of gauge what's going on? But from the very get-go, I would be verbal and outspoken, so to speak, about what your strengths are, because you need to train people in your new job. And I'm just going to put this up here for a second, the contact information in case you guys need it. But you need to train people in your new job about who you are as a professional and what you bring to the table, so that they leverage you for those strengths and they keep you in mind for different projects and tasks. It's not just enough, everyone, to understand what your strengths are. You have to tout them and bring them out into the open so that people understand what they are. Because sometimes, by the way, with some of your strengths, for example, if you're a detail-oriented person or you tend to need a lot of context for something, some of our strengths could come across for someone who's just strategic and big picture like I am. Sometimes that could come across as like nitpicky, and kind of there could be a rub there. So it's really important to articulate what your strengths are to everyone at work so that they understand where you're coming from and why you're asking questions or bringing things up. Because that's one of the things that you have value to bring to the table, but they may not see it that way. Okay? All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time today. Please feel free to set up a consultation if you have additional questions. I'd be happy to answer those for you. Have a great day.